We also released, I was just about to have a go actually at that, but our next guest will be able to help us on this one. I've just been this morning, also, I was going to editorialise on the Benjamin Bussey affair versus the mainstream media attack on Christian MP Hamish Campbell, apparently belonging to a cult in which he's done no harm himself, but it's been deliberately linked to sexual abuse, and wonder if there isn't, shall we say, a cockeyed or uh, inconsistency in which the mainstream media are regarding both of these issues. But on that particular issue, the Auckland University of Technology have been running over the last, as we know, 7 years now, a public trust survey on the media. And as we know, the media haven't been doing too well on that one. The most recent one that was released, in actual fact, was it last week? Yes, it was last week, and has received a great deal of attention this week. Obviously, suggests that the downward decline has arrested somewhat, but that a majority of New Zealanders still don't really trust the media, and they can actually tell you which media they trust more than others. And in addition to which, our trust levels seem to be less than those of other English-speaking countries with the same kind of survey as conducted. To try us to make sense of this, Dr. James Hollings joins us. And I thank you for your time this morning, James. Nice to have you along.
Thank you, Michael. Nice to be here.
James, tell me, why, in your view, don't the New Zealand public embrace the New Zealand mainstream media with the kind of trust levels that you might expect in a functioning democracy?
I wish I had an easy answer to that one. You're right. Just first of all, just thinking about that, New Zealand is relatively low compared to some fairly comparable countries. I'm just looking at the Trust in News New Zealand graph compared to a selection of countries. We're around 32% trust in news, I guess, compared to Australia 40, UK 36, USA about the same as us actually. The average is 40, we're down at 32. People like Netherlands up at 55. Finland 70. So
Yeah, it's very
Canada
high, isn't it?
almost 40. Yeah. So it's not good, is it? You'd have to say. Why is that? Excuse me.
And perhaps I should explain to our listeners, because I haven't introduced you properly, and I apologise for that. You are the senior lecturer and discipline leader, as it's called, of journalism at Massey University. You've taught journalism for 20 years. You are responsible for teaching many of the journalists now who apparently are not trusted. So you will have quite some insight into this particular issue.
Is it the journalists that's not trusted, or is it the brands, the mainstream media?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you've taught these people for the last 20 years in your role. You teach on a Master of Journalism, I think. So you've got, people who can, I guess, are they people who come out of university, come and do your master's course at Massey, and then they then go into the industry? Is that right?
We have two really. We have an undergraduate degree, called the Bachelor of Communication. You can major in journalism, and we have 100 and something odd students doing that. As does AUT, as does Canterbury and ARA down at Christchurch, the Broadcasting School. We also have, we're the only one pretty much left with a postgraduate degree, what we call conversion students. So people might have a science degree or something, they've suddenly decided they want to be a journalist, and they can come and do a one-year course and get a postgraduate diploma, which they can then turn into a master's if they want to. So that's the two sort of main streams people take to become a journalist these days, either at us or at AUT or at Canterbury or at ARA. So yes, but we are one of the biggest. Massey is the biggest, and then probably the longest running one. And yes, we take full responsibility for the fact that we are training these journalists going into the media, and the ones that are for media that's not trusted, as you say. You're quite right. So you're asking what's going on. I think a couple of things that stand out for me is big drop since COVID. I think COVID was a bit of a watershed moment, and that did quite a lot of damage, I think, to trust levels in the mainstream media in New Zealand. That's one of the things. Although it has been dropping
can
around
you
the other
explain, just let's unpack that one for a start, James. How did COVID impact so negatively upon the mainstream media in New Zealand? I mean, yes, you had those people on the lawn at Parliament, but they were apparently a distinct minority. That wouldn't have affected all of this country, would it? To the level that you would when you see those trust levels declining. What happened in COVID that led people who were not on the lawn at Parliament to start to distrust the media?
COVID was just one of the things, but I think one of the things that I believe New Zealand mainstream media got a little bit wrong in COVID was not really giving enough voice to people who were anti-vaxxers and the like. I know from some of my students who've been working in the provinces during that period, getting a lot of backlash from people who felt that their voices were excluded from the mainstream media and that their concerns were sort of marginalised. And that was wrong, I think. And I think the media was a little bit too quick to align itself with what seemed at the time to be sort of important public health messages. A little bit too quick, I think, to decide. It's easy to say in hindsight, of course, because we were all at the time baffled, weren't we? And not knowing what was going on. But in hindsight, one of my students did quite a good interesting piece of research for her master's on this, talking about what it was like to be a regional journalist in Nelson, particularly in that period. There was quite a strong anti-vax sort of sentiment. And yeah, they got a lot of backlash from people. And she wasn't the only one. There were others in other provincial areas as well. And the mainstream media, I think, didn't really do enough to sort of, I think, probably platform, if you want to use that word, those voices a little bit, or, it was a little bit too quick to sort of write them off.
I understand what you're saying, but I mean, that's fair enough. You might have excluded that group, who, as you say, were a distinct minority, though. So but that's the distinct minority. I mean, there weren't a lot of, obviously, over 90% of New Zealand, 92% in the end of adult New Zealanders got vaccinated. So they couldn't be described really as anti-vax. What if it was just that 8% who didn't get vaccinated, who didn't distrust them? Yeah. But it's more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Trump factor's got something to do with it. I mean, he's been basically pouring poison on the mainstream media for the last 8 years, and some of that has resonated, I think, with people. But that's an international thing. But you see, internationally, you've seen trust sort of dropping a little bit. We dropped a little bit faster, I think, in the last 4 or 5 years. That's part of it, I think. I think the rise of social media, it's getting more and more penetration and more and more stuff, and so that people are exposed to a lot more non-mainstream media messages. So that's part of it, I think. What else is going on? I think there's a lack of civics education in New Zealand about what the news media does and doesn't do, and why it's needed, and how we should be critical of it. That's obviously a fairly self-serving view as a journalist, but I really think that we undervalue what news media does, and what it can do, and why it's needed. I think courts get it. I mean, judges are pretty good at upholding, I think, the role of the news media in general. But I don't think our politicians really get it as much. It's the first target usually, kill the messenger. And there's been a lot of sort of creeping marginalisation of news media and journalists, which hasn't been helpful, I think. So all those things are sort of adding into declining trust.
Does that affect, can I ask you, well, the obvious thing is, my daughter, for example, is doing an undergraduate degree at Auckland, in a sort of classic liberal, but like a father thing. She mentioned to me journalism, and I just looked at her and went, yeah, right. And the reason that I would have said that now, and I wouldn't have said that 20 years ago or 40 years ago when I was an undergraduate, was because there doesn't seem a pathway in journalism to a job. And if anything, jobs are falling off in a big way, including in our mainstream, New Zealand Herald, stuff. Your derivatives like Newsroom, Spin-Off, Television New Zealand, Radio New Zealand will eventually, the chill winds will come through there as well. Is there really a pathway now for the 100 undergraduates you've got, or those who are doing your master's degree into journalism?
it's a narrower pathway to journalism. You're absolutely right, and there's less jobs. There's fewer jobs in mainstream journalism, but there are jobs. Our students are getting jobs in Radio New Zealand, some in TV New Zealand, some in Stuff, the Post, places like that. There are fewer jobs, but there is quite a lot of turnover. Always has been high turnover in journalism, as you probably know. So
Whereas people
there's
go
still
on to higher paid jobs elsewhere in the
yeah,
corporate sector.
yeah. Target Daily Times, they're a big employer down south. A lot of the regional communities still employ people and need people. You had on your program recently Ian Carson from Iwataki today, and there's sort of small niche things starting up where you don't hear much about. There is still money, I think, in local media. In fact, I would argue that that is an under-noticed area. Why did Stuff buy Wairapa Age? Why did NZME buy the Gisborne Herald? They're not doing it for charity. It's because they think there's money in it. And those people are employing. One of my graduate students from 3 years ago is now the editor of the Gisborne Herald. So, yes, there are jobs. There are fewer jobs, but those that really want to do it, there are pathways in. There's not much money in it. We were very upfront with our students about that. Pay is poor compared to other pathways. But there's also this communication industry, which uses many of the same skills as journalism, and which journalism is excellent preparation for a lot of the jobs in communication. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So that's a strong pathway that we, I think, quite rightly point out to parents and school leavers considering doing a Bachelor of Communication, majoring in journalism or PR or communication, whatever you want to call it, that, there's 30 or 40 people employed at the Wellington City Council to do communication, and and they get well paid. Walker Coulter,
They certainly do. Mind you,
at least that, if not more.
There's another argument, though. I mean, are they in actual fact journalists or are they propagandists? And I would suggest to you, if you're working in communications for a local government, and I'm in local government, as you're probably aware, James, your communications people are hardly dispassionate. They are propagandists on behalf of the council. It would be undermining the whole point of why you teach journalism, which is to ask the questions and to tell the truth.